All right. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Monica. Nice to be with you. Nice to chat with you again.
Likewise, I know it's not morning over there, and I love that it's the European in us that we have to have our cafe or tea before and after the
Or
day.
vase.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that we're connected again, and we we had a little bit of intro and just told our audience what we're going to be going over a little bit. And so I felt like today is our first topic, just jumping right into it. I thought it would make sense for us to talk about what to expect during a spiritual awakening. And go ahead. I know you said like we go through all these different feelings of fear. Am I going crazy? And that's how you
Yeah,
connected. I was afraid of my own shadow for a minute, right?
yeah, exactly. And I mean, sometimes it can be quite scary because it literally turns your life upside down. And depends on the intensity of it, because for some people it's a gradual process, and for others it really is like a wham in your face, like a 180-degree turn as far as your life is concerned. So there are many, many things that indicate that a spiritual awakening is actually taking place, and then that becomes something that is necessary to follow through with, because the more you work with it, the more expansive the experience actually becomes, and the deeper the awakening actually becomes. So it's a wonderful, wonderful process. I mean, throughout some of the talks, what I'll do is chuck in some of the some little anecdotes of experiences that I had in the very beginning. And I've got loads in the signs and synchronicities, which is what we're going to talk about in the next session. But just as far as the awakening is concerned, it's really characterized by events that take place in somebody's life. Something actually happens which creates or is characterized by the individual having a completely different perception of the world around them. It's like suddenly what they thought life was and what they thought the world was is turned on its head, or turned upside down, or there's a doorway open to something that is so completely different. And
I'm
there are,
thinking about two questions. I'm so sorry, and I'm not
that's fine. Yeah, please do.
I'm sorry, but I'm like I can't let this and I know
Yeah,
that we do this tug war with me and you all the time where I'm like
yeah.
and without you, it's almost like going to church. Like one thing I love connecting with you is you bring me back to like checking myself, getting on track. Because with life going on, we kind of try to forget that we're awake. And I'm gonna let you tap into what that means. But it's a tug war because you'll see the synchronicity, the
Synchronicity.
yes, and you're just like frustrated. I love all the memes that I see on social media when it shows someone frustrated because they're seeing this or seeing that. I'm like, what is it? I'm going cuckoo. Stop, leave me alone. And you can't run from it. And now there was something I was really gonna say about it. Oh, and throughout your day, you get these signs, and it's almost like you want to run from it because you start to think you're cuckoo, you're overthinking it, and you're like, am I guiding myself or am I just totally making this whole scenario up on my day in the daily life?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it really does feel like that. It really does feel, as if you're losing the plot, basically, so to speak. And that is because you're seeing the world in a very different way. You're not perceiving it in the same way that people around you are. And, we could say that for the most part, we've been programmed to interact with life in a certain way, and that has been programmed by our culture. It's programmed by the media, especially by the media, the kind of things that we watch, the things that happen around us, the expectations that we have. We're programmed by our families to want to achieve in a certain way, that success looks like this, so therefore this is what I need to do in life. And suddenly all of that starts falling apart, and there's a deep, deep calling from within, and it is very much an internal process. Very often it's externalized, as well, as if somebody else is pulling your strings or guiding your life. There's a guide or an angel or a, whatever it might be. But it's very much an internal and an internally led process that actually starts to happen from that point. And the most important thing is that we learn to trust that process, to trust ourselves, and begin to take those little small steps along the way. But, sort of when our perceptions about life change, this can lead to people having like major career changes. People call it midlife crisis. And it used to happen that it was generally, from an age point of view, it was usually only when people hit their sort of mid to late 30s, that generally this awakening tended to happen, where they were able to see that something wasn't quite right about the way that they were living their life, or there's a crisis that happens that gets them to look at life in a different way. But what's happening now is it's happening at younger and younger ages. So you get individuals in their late teens and early 20s that suddenly have this very different perspective. Their eyes have been opened to a different mechanism. And there's a whole lot of things that actually start to happen. Some of the indications that you're going through an awakening are that you see things very, very differently, but you see things with a sense of awe and wonder. Because these synchronicities that we're talking about, which we'll go into more detail in the next session, is that they're almost like little mini miracles. It's like magic starts to happen in your life. Yeah, that's exactly it. There is suddenly a sense of magic about the way that your life actually flows. So there is a sense of wonder and amazement and curiosity that begins to emerge, when certain things actually string together. It's that life almost becomes brighter and more fascinating because we're making new connections with things, with people, and especially with nature, with plants, with animals. Very, very often people will experience a deeper, more profound, different connection with nature, and they can't explain it. You can't explain it because it's an impulse that's arising from deep within. And it's basically, it's your soul that's actually awakening and communicating with you. It's your true self, your own source, that is actually driving the process. And very often as well, what people will go through and experience in that is sort of a sense of timelessness. In athletics, or when people are really, really focused on something, they talk about being in the zone. And in that zone, there's no sense of time. So with an awakening, what you might find also is that individuals just have these little pockets in their lives where that sense of time goes out of the window, where their entire attention is on the present moment. So it's like you stop worrying about the past so much and stop being so concerned about the future. And these little pockets of being fully present in the moment become more and more frequent. So time actually becomes irrelevant. So these are some of the things that become evident when you are awakening to a way that is actually beyond the normal. Time can seem to speed up or slow down or just disappear completely. So sometimes it's a warped sense of time, things kind of drag out or speed up. So there's a lot of people actually experience that. There is,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry. No, I didn't. That wasn't on purpose. But I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I think for me, like you started mentioning that something tends to happen in one's life for them to go through a spiritual awakening. I know for me, my best friend passed away, and I had multiple things going on. And to believe I had COVID and just so many different things. And so really, I was isolated from even my kids and everyone, and going through all these different things. And I felt like a dog at the time. I was looking forward to people walking by through the window. That wasn't a part of that was COVID. But you mentioned that people go through a rough time when they go through their awakening, and I realized, well, being isolated or being by yourself, you go into deep thoughts. Like, when a friend passes away, I noticed I was seeing the numbers 111 all the time. And I felt a presence. I always said, oh, I feel like she is here with me, but I felt like in the energy in the air, it just felt heavy. And then I
Yes.
noticed songs. Like, I would think to myself, I always remember I was going to go buy a new car. I shouldn't have qualified for this car, by the way. My credit wasn't up to par, not for this amount at least. And I mean, everyone's going through financial crisis right now.
Yeah.
And I said, I wasn't worried about it. And that's kind of like how we manifest. And I didn't worry about the how. I was just on my way and I'm like, I don't know. I guess I didn't really care about the car either. I was just like, I just need to get a car. I was like, I'm gonna get a car. And my best friend's favorite song from like the 90s came on. And it just like, I just kind of looked at it, and then the time was 11:11, and I was just like, okay. And I remember like the day after, I was going to the bank for something else, and I just felt like I was being guided, and another song came on. And sometimes I think like, okay, I'll ask for a sign, and then I'll like kind of take I'll say, I'm not gonna ask for it. Nah, it's not gonna happen. It's all in my head, and then it will still happen, even though I took it away. And I'm just like, okay, am I going cuckoo? Like, it's just, there's so many
Well,
different things that happen, and then you see the bees
yes.
around, and just so
Yeah.
much.
I think that's also what's key. You know, sometimes people are looking for a formulaic approach. It's like, do this and you will awaken. If you do that, then you will awaken. It doesn't happen that way, because we are each individually programmed to awaken at exactly the right time and in the way that is actually perfect for us. And the kind of thing that you're talking about as well is that the experiences that we have and the way that it happens are unique and personal to us as individuals, because it has specific meaning, and it helps to shift our own worldview. So however that happens is a completely individualized experience. So there is no formula, there is no, sort of three-step process. That's not the way that it works.
And
There is an energy or a force that's driving it, though, that is actually forcing people to awaken at the moment, because it is ultimately an energetic framework, and the energetics of the planet are shifting and changing to support massive awakening. And I think I might have mentioned that a little bit in the introduction.
I
Yeah.
felt like the more I talk to people, I catch their verbiage, and I just notice how so many different people are going through similar, and it's pretty cool whether it's an individual or as a couple. They're kind of on a different pace, but they're both maybe going through it, and I mean, it's so amazing to see so many people awakening. And I remember I went to go have dinner with my best friend, and I said, "What are you, psychic?" And he goes, "I am actually."
Yeah.
Um, and I said, "What?" And I realized, he goes, I have this knowing, this feeling all the time, and I never would have expected it from him. And it was pretty cool. And I just catch little things, and I'm usually the brave one to open the conversation. And people are talking about more and more what they're going through. And I'm nowhere near a master by any means, but I do lead the conversation further so that they could feel, it's almost like coming out of the closet kind of thing. Like, oh, who's gonna judge
Yes.
me? Who's gonna think I'm crazy?
And I think that's also really important, because when we give ourselves permission and we trust the knowingness that it is the right time and the right conversation, and the right opportunity to open that up with somebody. And if we trust that impulse that arises within it all, that's what it all comes back down to, is actually trusting yourself and the impulses, and the movement, the energy movement of spirit within you, is that gives other people permission to open up. And I've experienced that over and over again in my own life. There are times when I keep quiet, And there are times when I really feel prompted to say something and it'll be the exact thing that was needed for that moment. I'm so glad you said that. Because this, and that is what I've actually been experiencing. And it gives you them an opportunity to validate that individual and their experiences. Because very often that's exactly it. When people initiate or begin the awakening process, it can feel very lonely, as you were saying, very isolating, because suddenly you are seeing things in a different way to other people, and you think that you are absolutely there on your own, when in actual fact it's happening in great waves around the world, and many people are waking up. So when we have the courage to stand in our own space, to be in our center, to stand in our truth, in our own awakened space, it gives others permission to do that. So it's a really important
I remember telling my mom, I said, not
concept.
too many people are spiritual. And she goes, Monica, that's not true. You just don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was like,
Everything
no,
is
they're not.
spiritual. Yeah. Yeah. Everything is, and everybody is, because of the field that we are in. It's just that some are more disconnected from that element of themselves than others are. And that's what the awakening is. It sort of breaks through those barriers that have been imposed, the cage that's been actually put around the true essence of self. And that sort of one of the other really prominent things, and I think you mentioned that, which is part of the experience, is it becomes an awareness of an energy, of a force, of a presence that pervades all things. So in the process of awakening, it almost becomes part and parcel. It becomes a connectedness with everything. This perception of being connected with everything through events that take place, through those meetings with people, that there is something that goes and runs much deeper throughout life than what we have been taught or what we have up until now expected.
Now,
Yeah.
I know that we
It can
mentioned,
be mind blowing.
you've told me before, like once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep kind of thing. And I always remember, the more, I always remember I called the psychic and she said, well, you feel it. And
Yeah.
I just kind of, it stayed in my mind. And I said, what does she mean? And I'm just researching and researching. It was like my Netflix till 3 a.m. It's addicting. And when you meet someone else going through it, they're just as addicted. And it's like the new hot item. That's what you want to talk
Yeah.
about. And she's like, I said, she knows, she said I felt it. And she just helped me. It was just the simple things that she said that stuck with me. And I started reading about things and I realized, oh, I'm like this. I guess they have titles on things. Whether you're an empath or you're very intuitive and maybe telepathic, whatever it might be, you're realizing why you get a certain feeling about somebody else. And I know that's going to be a topic for another day. That's going to be really exciting. But I also remember the more I knew, the more I would freak out about other things too. Um, I'm a woman of faith, and I just started, you just could dig in so many different things like the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And I just remember laying in bed, kind of freaking out. And I said, I don't want to learn anymore. I don't want to learn anymore. And then I was like, unless if I'm really supposed to, then I will be given a sign. And the next day, I was on a networking Zoom, and it was like 3 empaths on the group, psychic empaths, and they talked about their gifts, which is mind blowing. Nobody ever talks about that on business networking, any type of business networking. And I'm like, okay, I feel like the 2x4 just hit me over the head. I got the sign, right? But
Yeah.
I continue. You can't run from it. It's there. You
No.
already know. And
In
not
fact,
the
that
little things people say.
yes, that's exactly it. You can't run from it. It's like you now being directed on a different path. It's a path that leads you into more expansiveness, an expansiveness of your sense of self, an expansiveness of your understanding of the world, of other people, an expansiveness that shows you the interconnectedness of all of life, how we are connected with everything, how there is a presence, a force, and energy that runs through not just people, but even inanimate objects. You know, it's where you get so many people being drawn to working with crystals and all of that sort of thing. And it also, with the awakening, it moves us ultimately beyond labels. Because I think in the initial stages, it is it is very easy to be able to reattach labels to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly we become understanding of the fact that we have a sensitivity that makes us empathic
Mm-hmm.
to other people and what they are feeling. So we really like you know, putting labels on things and labeling ourselves empaths when we realize that everybody has that capacity. We are all empaths, some more than others. It's just an intensification. It's just
Yeah.
something that occurs along a spectrum,
For
if you like.
example, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I was
Yeah,
joining groups. I was looking for like-minded people and not my people, so I didn't come off crazy. But I remember I joined a group of empaths, and some of them sounded like they were suicidal. It was just mind-blowing how they're like, I'm
yeah.
an empath, so I feel. I'm like, no, you need counseling. But
But
no,
no, but
they're
yeah,
overly
it's
sensitive. And I do
uh,
get that because as you know, our awakening may happen when we're going through a tough time. I was very in a very vulnerable stage in my life, and I realized I'm usually more grounded, and I usually don't let things bother me as much. And I realized that when someone else was upset, if I was on the phone with a friend and they were upset or angry with someone, all of a sudden I would feel that anger, and I was just,
yes,
what is
yes,
wrong with me?
yes.
Feeling like I'm just raging. And then it made me realize I need to ground myself. And it took me a while to realize. And obviously, I was going through learning of what that meant and how to take my power back and say, hey, that is not how I feel about this situation. That is somebody else. And it took me a while. And I call, and you know, my grandmother, I talk about her a lot, but she helped me a lot going through everything. And she said, oh, I struggled for years. And if someone else had a tummy ache, I had a tummy ache.
Yeah,
So there's so many different, I don't want to say levels, but like you said, like some are more empathetic.
intensities.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
it was tough because I didn't want to be around anyone for a while because I would feel what they were feeling.
feel
And
everything.
oh my God, I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm
Yeah.
like, is anybody in the room happy?
Well, that's, I mean, I understand that because I also experienced that so strongly in the beginning, was this extreme sensitivity because of this. It was like a fire, a force that was running through my nervous system. Like I said, I could actually feel and perceive, you know, sort of what was going on 8 feet away the minute somebody walked into my office. You know, going out to the supermarket was actually a chore because you literally were picking up all of the energies. And that is actually being so wide open that there is no discernment. And over a period of time, we learn to manage that process, because so often with the awakening, you know, people go, oh, we're all one and it's all wonderful, but we need to understand the balance that is important between having our own boundaries and being interconnected, and that we can be empathic and not take responsibility for what somebody else is feeling. Because for those of us that have a very strong healing instinct within us, it's like we feel what somebody's feeling and we want to fix it very often. So we feel what somebody's feeling and we immediately take responsibility for it because we want to fix it, even if it's fixing it within ourselves. And the energy then gets stuck. It's not actually flowing.
I put a
So
lot
true
of
mastery. Yeah, sorry, Monica. I just can if I can just finish with that thought. So when we learn to master that, we have the capacity to remain compassionate for what somebody is experiencing, and yet engage a neutrality within ourselves that prevents us from taking that energy on. And part of that is really learning to say no, and when and how to say no and actually impose our boundaries. And it's key for a lot of women, because that is so deeply programmed into our psyche. So that becomes part and parcel of the awakening. So people think, well, it's all love, light, joy, and bliss when you awaken. But what happens is it takes you on a journey of necessity to exploring. It opens up everything inside of you, and everything that has had a lid on it in your unconscious that we didn't even realize was there.
I just realized being in business for myself is, we don't always walk a perfect line, or maybe someone might have a concern about something, and whether it's fine or not, I would always feel the energy of, like, I could feel their energy. And before, I don't think we thought it was just in our own head kind of thing. And now I realize whether they text me or not, I feel it really strong. If I'm thinking of a certain person, I will feel it. And I'm like, I got to reach out to this person and let them know they're okay. Or when they text me, I could feel their anger. My ex-husband, he's a narcissist and very verbally abusive. Just when he texts me, even whether I read it or not, I feel the rage as if he was yelling at my face. And nobody
Yeah.
understands when I say that, but I literally feel like it's in my face. And I probably always had these feelings, but now I'm more aware. But the great thing is, being aware means that you can now help yourself and take your power back and ground yourself. So I just wanted to touch, that was the difference of when you're awakened and when you're not. You kind of get ran over by the bus, but now that you're aware, you can learn how to control it. And I'm so grateful for that. And it's a process. It's just like going to the gym. It has to happen every day, right?
Yeah.
You have to take that every single day, and it's why that me time in the morning is important. But
Yes.
you just mentioned that, and I just thought, like, that sometimes we think that's in our head, that we're feeling it. And I almost don't like being near my phone, because I just feel like I get anxiety
Yeah.
thinking when it goes off, because I already know someone's upset because maybe they're like energy vampires, and I don't want to take that call because it's going to be the same bad talk about their life, and I could feel their energy that they're upset with me for not wanting to hear it.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't realize either that we carry around patterns within us that can be triggered by other people. So yes, it's really important to be very, very aware, and it is a journey and it is a process. Be very aware of what arises within us during those interactions, all of the judgments, all of the emotions, all of the anger, so that we can take responsibility for our own energy, as opposed to taking on board everybody else's. So that is sort of where the boundaries
And
actually
I
come
feel
in.
like that's why I always thought I get exhausted because I'm a hyper person. I'm like,
Yeah.
but then I realized I am hyper. I have my mind in a million and one places, but then when you're also taking on what other people are feeling, it's draining.
Yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
want to ask two questions. I know we're coming to the end.
Yeah.
And I know we always kind of get off, it's not really off topic. We're probably going to continue in another.
Oh, there'll be lots that comes up in subsequent
So
conversations.
it's like, if you feel like you didn't get your answer, like all your answers in one session, trust me, it's gonna be you can't get all the answers in one 30-minute session. You're gonna get it in the next and the next. So we're just starting talking about the spiritual awakening. You're gonna learn so much in other sessions, but I did want to bring up this topic because it's something I thought about, and call me crazy, but I said I want my kids to be aware. Why didn't my mom teach me about, like, how we are, and about energy and our souls? And why didn't she tell me about signs? And what, like, we're taught about our religious beliefs. Why are we not taught about, like, I feel like this is pretty powerful stuff. This is who we are. Why are we not taught in school, or like going to, like, we go to catechism? Why are we not, why is there no school for this?
Um, okay, it's actually a very interesting question, and really, what it boils down to is that the cultures and the institutions of the world have all been orientated towards taking away your personal sense of control and placing it in an external authority. So if you look at the religious institutions, there is always an external authority, whether it's the priest, whether it is the vicar, whether it's the rabbi, it doesn't matter. There's an external authority and a mediator between you and the divine source. What happens when you awaken, you realize that you don't actually need that because you have the capacity to make that connection yourself. And when you start understanding how the world has been geared and how it really works, which is very different to how we were taught, you begin to realize how much power we as individuals actually do have within ourselves. And we start withdrawing that from all of the external institutions. And the world has been set up that way. It has been because for millennia we have lived within a patriarchal system that has been orientated towards dominance over others. And the only way that that could be placed into effect was if the patriarchal systems identified an external source of authority. When we become cognizant of our own inner authority, which is that voice of spirit, the awakening to that guidance that actually comes up from our own source from within, it's kind of like the external game is over. And that's really what we're going through at the moment, which is really so interesting because the patriarchal systems and the systems of external control are breaking down. And that's what this massive, massive wave of awakening is actually about. So we can talk about the details of our own individual process. The purpose of awakening is to shift and restructure society in a very different image. And there's so much more that can actually be said about that, but I hope that answers your question. We weren't taught that because our forefathers and our ancestors, and they were never taught that. So they just handed on systems that had been, that had been imposed upon them. That was the world as they understood it. And that's the whole thing about awakening, is it changes our entire perspective
And
and
can you
perception
imagine,
of the
really,
world.
if we wanted to teach awakening, and for example, my grandmother says, I never see numbers. I'm sorry, I can't
No,
the word. So we all have different
it's unique.
frequencies or signs, and we all are more aware. Like some of us are more intuitive than others, and it's all a belief system. Everything is belief. The more you believe, the more aware you are of everything going around you and in your knowing. And so I feel like if we put that in a school system, now one is going to feel like less than the other, right? Because one doesn't get it, the other doesn't understand. One is this way, one is that way. That might be too difficult to even process. I know myself
Um,
years ago
I
said,
think, yeah, they actually say, there is a wonderful expression, and I think it was the Jesuits that came up with this, is give me a child up to the age of 7 and I will give you the man. So the indications are that the programming that takes place before the age of 7. So everything that those children understand about themselves was actually programmed to a greater or lesser degree in their very early childhood years. So if children were actually taught from the beginning, children naturally have that connection. They talk to their invisible friends. They have wonderful imaginations. They create when they're given the freedom to. So if you actually allow and nurture that within children from a very early age, you will get them all coming through with a very powerful awakening, as long as there are no interventions to actually stymie that, because we're talking chemicals, we're talking the types of foods that they are given to eat. And I'm not talking about getting neurotic. I'm just talking about taking a look at the chemicals that are going into their bodies, whether it is pharmaceuticals, whether it is through food and nurturing and nourishment, and whether it is actually a belief system that is being imposed upon them and actually programming them. So I think there is a great deal going on at the moment. Um, that is either going to work for or against the awakening. And the children are being particularly impacted in this world by what's going on, and that's almost like a whole other subject. But if we can give children and the freedom to actually explore those capacities within themselves at a very early age, I don't think we need to worry about, you know, sort of some being falling behind, etc., because they will be given equal opportunities to explore and to validate each of them in their own role. So even if they are less intuitive, they might have an instinctive connection with the earth, that they can grow things, or they might have an instinctive capacity to understand structure and form. That's not necessarily intuition as we might understand it, but it is an intuitive impulse that guides them as far as their purpose is concerned. So there is an individual, you know, the awakening also brings with it an understanding and an honoring of each and every individual and the role that they play in life. And if you think about life as this huge tapestry, every single person is a stitch in the tapestry. And without that one stitch, the tapestry is incomplete. So every single human being actually has a role to play in completing this amazing, magical, beautiful picture and unfolding it. You know, and that's part and parcel of the awakening, is being aware of that.
My son years ago told me he would see ones all the time, and at the time I wasn't awake, so I was like,
Yeah, that's
okay.
exactly. Yeah, whereas if you have that awareness, it becomes a very different discussion
Yeah, and now
and a
he's
very
learned a
different
little bit
history.
with me, but he's also like he learned a lot, he believes a lot, and the kid's 15 is like 3 years ago I got
Yeah,
my numerology reading, and I'm like in my late 30s just getting through it, right? But
and
he
it's all
had,
perfect.
obviously he was going through that path at such a young age, and he was like, well, forget mom, I'm gonna look it up myself.
It's just, yeah, he's aware, you know, and if that is actually encouraged and guided, and if he is encouraged through that process, then he does come into the world with a greater sense of self-confidence. I mean, one of the consequences of so much of the programming is that we have, because we don't have that inherent connection with our own sense of self and our self-identity, we identify with everything external. We actually grow up lacking in self-confidence. We think if we actually act in a certain way, it demonstrates confidence, and that's not necessarily the case because it's not something that we feel inside. So the awakening also brings with it a completely different sense of self and a restructuring of our identity to a large degree. There's so much that we can, and I
Yeah,
know
I
that
was
there's
just
going to
gonna
be
say,
a
I'm gonna
lot.
end this there, but what you just said is true. Everything about like being in tune with yourself is self-love and confidence is more about trusting yourself
Yes,
and
absolutely.
believing and loving,
Yeah,
like starts here. And people say that so much, but there's no true understanding of what that means.
yeah,
People think it's getting in front of the mirror and hugging themselves. So it gets so much deeper, and I know we will go over so much more.
yeah.
And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I know we can go and rant this way and that way. And that's what is going to have you coming back, because that's how
Yeah,
it
this
is. I'm sure when you talk with anyone, you start on one topic and then what do they call it? You just keep going.
always, yeah, it kind of, it goes where it needs to, you know. I mean, that's exactly it. And that's why I very often don't script things. I might make a couple of rough notes, but it's kind of, I know that it's going to actually go to where it needs to, because it will be the things that whoever comes to the video and whoever hears it, it's going to be what they need to hear at this moment in time. So yeah, the perfect time, with the perfect information and the perfect insight is always there when it is needed.
Definitely.
And I live by that. I do. I live by that. So
Well, I love always our chat, and I want to thank you so much for today. I hope that there was a lot of value that people will get out of this. I know for me, I would continue to dig and dig, and I just hope everyone sees the value. And I look forward to seeing you and everybody else on our next session.
Lovely. Look forward to it too. Thanks, Monica, and thank you, everybody. Lots
Bye.
of love. Bye.